What's going on, guys? John Elder here from Tkinter.com, and in this video, we're going to dive into the button widget. Oh yeah. Alright guys, like I said, in this video, we're going to learn absolutely everything there is to know about the button widget. This video is part of my in-depth widget playlist, so check that out if you're new to Tkinter. Link in the pinned comment below. And also be sure to grab a free PDF copy of my Tkinter Widget Quick Reference Guide book. Just head over to tkinter.com/widget-book or find the link in the pinned comment as well. And while you're there, check out membership in tkinter.com where you can get all my Tkinter videos and courses and all future courses for one low price. Use coupon code YouTube to get 30% off membership while you still can. Okay, let's learn about the button widget. All right, like I said, in this video, we're gonna look at the button. And here I've got just a basic Tkinter app and a button on here. We click it, nothing actually happens. But we're gonna talk about this button in this video. Now, buttons may seem very boring, but there is like 23, 24, 25 different attributes you can use to mess around with the button. And most people don't even know many of them exist. So we're gonna talk about all of them in this video. That's sort of what this book does. It goes through every single widget and talks about all the attributes. So if you didn't download the free PDF copy of this book, go ahead and do that now. I'll put the link in the description below. So let's head over to our code. I'm using the Sublime Text Editor in the Get Bash terminal as always. And as always, you can find a link to the code in the pinned comment section below, as well as a link to the playlist with all the other videos in this widget series. So check that out if you haven't so far. This is actually the first video in the widget series. We're just gonna go through all the widgets alphabetically and just talk about them all. One per video. B for button, that's right at the top of the list. So that's what we're gonna do in this video. So I've just got our basic Tkinter starter code that we sort of always have. Got a little app, 500 by 350. And I'm gonna come down here and I'm just gonna create a button called anything you want. I'm gonna call it my button. And that's gonna be a button and we wanna put it in root. And let's just start out with the text equaling click me, okay? Now, once we've created it, we need to pack it onto the screen. So let's go my_button dot pack. And I'm gonna give this a pad Y of like 50 to really push it down the screen since there's nothing really else in our app. Let's go ahead and save this. I'm calling this buttons.py. Head over to our terminal. I'm in my tkinter.com directory. That's where I'm going to be saving these files. Put it in any directory you want. Doesn't matter at all. And let's run Python buttons.py. And when we do, we get this little button that says click me. Pretty boring. Nothing happens here, but that's the button. So now I want to spend the rest of this video talking about all the different attributes, showing you each one, how to use them, what they do, and all that good stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm gonna come back over here and I'm just going to add a comma here and give us some space. And I'm just gonna paste in this list of attributes. And like I said, there's 20, 22, 23, something like that in this list. So you see I've got them all commented out. We'll just go through these one at a time and kind of knock these guys out. So active background is the background color of the button when it's active. So let's just go ahead and change this. And you can use hex codes. So like 0000000. Or you can use, just say like black. Let's go ahead and save this and run it just to see what that looks like. And you can see when I click it, when I hold down my mouse button, like boom, like this, it's now active and it's black. When I let off the mouse button, boom, it goes back to normal, right? That's the active background color. So, okay, that's cool. Now the active foreground color, same thing, but instead of the background, it's gonna be the foreground. So let's say, I don't know, red. Doesn't matter at all. Save this, run it. When we click this, you'll see the text is red now when I'm holding my button down. So this is active. Now, foreground in most widgets are the text color more often than not. So it's changing the text color to red, the foreground color. So, okay, that's cool. Next we have anchor. This allows you to sort of move the widget around the app. So the default here is gonna be center, which is this guy, right? This is what we already have. But you can change this to a direction. And the directions are north, south, east, and west. North, south, east, and west, right? Just like in a map. You also have combinations of those. So northeast, southeast, southwest, northwest, you get the idea. So if we want to put it south, it's just lowercase s. Go ahead and save this, head back over here, run it. And you can't really see the difference because there's nothing else to sort of reference it to. But if there's other things, this is going to move stuff around, right? So again, you can have north, south, east, west, etc. You can have like southeast, northwest, all the things, right? So I'm just going to move this back to center and we're good to go. So BG stands for background. And again, we can just, change this to something dramatic. This is going to change the background color. And you can see now the whole thing is just black, right? We don't have to click on it. It's just black. So I don't really like that all that much. we could change it back to a default with system button face, I think is the default on at least Windows. Yeah. And now we get it back to normal. So, okay. BD stands for border width. So if we give this something dramatic like a 10, this is going to change the border size of our button. So you can see now it's got this sort of huge relief. And we'll talk about relief in a little bit. That'll change sort of the shape of this. But you can see now the border is huge. So that's kind of weird. I'm just going to go ahead and change it to something more normal. So next we want to talk about command, and command is the most important part of the button. When you click it, what does that button do? Right now we've just got a button that we click it, nothing happens. You're never going to have that in real life. Whenever you have a button in real life, when somebody clicks it, you want something to happen. So that's what command is, and we don't need quotation marks here. We can just create a function name. Well, I'm just going to call it clicker, right? So now this function will get called every time we click the button. Well, we don't have that function yet, so let's come up here and let's define clicker. And so what do we want to happen? Let's just go ahead and change the text of our button. That's the only thing we really have to play with here. So we can do that by configuring the button. So let's go my_button.config. And let's change the text to you clicked the button. Woohoo! All right, so let's go ahead and save this. Head back over here. Let's run this guy. And now the button says click me. When we click it, boom, it changes to you click the button. So a very simple example, but whatever you want to do, you can put in this function and it'll do it when the button gets clicked. So, okay, next we have default, and the options for default are active, disabled, normal, and disabled. So the default is disabled for this. So we can change this to active, for instance. If we save this, we're not really gonna see much of a difference. Well, we sort of can. You can see it has a little bit different border by default, right? And it's not that useful to me, but if you want one of your buttons to kind of stand out from other buttons a little bit, that's an easy way to do it. But like I said, not all that interesting. So let's change this back to disabled. That's the default. So now disabled foregrounds, when the button is disabled in the state, this will change the foreground color. So if we change this to, for instance, green, if we save this and run it, we're not going to see anything different here. It's got the same foreground color. The black text is normal. But if we come down here, and we might as well, I guess, skip down to state and change this. Now state does what it sounds like. What's the button state? And that could be normal, active, or disabled. So let's say we change this to disabled. We now have a disabled foreground color. If we save this, come back over here and reload, you see the color of the text, the foreground, the disabled foreground is green. And we can try and click this. I'm clicking my mouse right now and nothing happens. Why? The button has been disabled, right? That's what the state does. It disables that button. So if we wanted to sort of change it back to a state of normal, which I believe is the default, yeah, we get regular, no more green text, right? So, okay, that's disabled foreground and state, I guess. Font changes the font of the text in the thing. So we can say, let's change this to Helvetica and say we want size 32, right? We save this and run it. Our button now is going to be nice and big. And you'll notice the button resizes to fit the font size, right? So you can change the size of your button with your height and width attributes that we'll look at in just a minute. But an easy way to do it also is to just change the font size if you want that. Now, you might want a big button with regular small text. If that's the case, you wouldn't resize the button with the font. You would use height and width that we'll talk about in a little bit. But if you just want to change the font size or the font type, you know, we're using Helvetica. Maybe you want to use Arial or Tahoma or whatever font you have on your system. You can do it just like that. Pretty simple. Pretty cool. FG, we've already looked at this and other things, but that's the foreground color. So if we want to change this to yellow, that would basically change the text color, right? I don't know why you would want to change it to yellow because that is hideous, right? But there you go. Let's change this back to blue. How about blue? Okay. Now here's height. This will be depending on your button. So right now we've got a text button, right? We've got text in it. And so the height will sort of use the text size of this. So right now the height is basically part of like 32, right? Think of it like that. If we instead used an image, which we haven't done yet, but you can, then it's going to use pixels instead of text size as the height. So let's change this to 50. Probably not going to change it all that much, but let's go ahead and see. Oh yeah, it did. So you can see now the height is nice and big with 50. You just sort of have to play around with this. Let's give it a 10 and see how that looks. Still very big. So I am going to just kind of undo this because we don't really need that. Next is highlight background, and this will set the color used for the highlight border when the button doesn't have focus. And focus is when you sort of like tab to something. You notice when you tab over to something, it kind of activates a little bit. In fact, let's just kind of, let me unhighlight this. Let's run this guy again. And if I tab, boom, you can see now it's sort of got a thing going on here. That's active, right? And you'll notice it's sort of, what color is that? Sort of yellowish, right? So let's change this to blue. I don't know. And again, for all of these colors, you can use your hex color codes. And you can see, well, there isn't much of a border there. So maybe we need to change the border size as well. So let's change this to 20. Now, we run this guy. You really still can't see much of a color change. And when I tab it, boom, it turns yellow. So yeah, not all that interesting. Just remember, this is when it doesn't have focus. The highlight color, on the other hand, defines the color used for the highlight border when the button has focus. So let's change that to green and see. Save this guy, run it. Now when we tab, it's still really not kind of all that interesting. Is that a different color? I can't tell. I don't think that's green. Let's try red. Tab, nope, still kind of the same. So maybe Windows is defaulting over it or something. Not sure, but not that useful. Let's knock these both out. Let's change this guy back to 2. Right. All right, so image. Now we can, up until now, we've been using text, right? But we can actually add an image here. So I'm going to come up here and let's define an image. So I'm going to call this login, and this is going to be a photo image. And it's going to be pointing at images/login.png. Now inside of my Tkinter directory, you can see I've got this folder called images. If we cd into images and then look in here, you can see I've got this login PNG. I've also got our icon that we use at the top of our little app. But this is just a basic image I stuck in there. So let's go back. And you can see I can use a relative path here, or you could go c/tkinter.com/ like this. But since this file is in the same directory, we can use a relative path here. Now we can just use this login variable right there. No quotation marks, just the actual name of the variable. And if we come back here and run this guy, you see we've got now an image. Very cool. You'll also notice there's a border around here. Well, that's because we set the border earlier to 2. If we set that to 0 and said, hey, no border at all, now if we come back here and run this guy again, our button sort of disappears. The border's gone. Now it's just this guy. And you can see it kind of moves a little bit. I might do some other videos about button images later on where when you click it, it changes to, something else like a toggle switch or something. I don't know. We'll see if people are interested in that, but that's how you do that. So I'm going to change that back and I'm going to undo this guy because we just want to keep it with text for now. Justify defines the alignment of text if you have multiple lines of text. We don't, but I could show you how to do that in just a minute. And this can be left, right, or center. So let's say right? So if we save this and run it, you're not going to see any difference at all here. It's still just going to say click me because we don't have multiple lines of text in this widget. We could. In fact, let's just go ahead and jump to that here. Let's see, Wraplength right here. Wraplength defines whether or not text should be wrapped. Should it be all on one line or should it be on multiple lines? And it sets sort of where the cutoff is. So the default is 0, but if you want to sort of play with this, 50 is a good number to start with. Now we need to come up here and add some more text so we can see. So I'm just going to paste a bunch of these in here, save this, and now run it. And you can see it's kind of hard to read, but now we have multiple lines. And you'll notice it's all justified to the right? Like here, the K is to the right of all of these things. So let's play around with this, see if we can make this look better here. So I'm going to come over here to our font. Let's change this back to like 12. Maybe this will make it look a little easier to read. Oh yeah. So here you can see click me, right? So notice, like I said, it's all justified on this right side. This right side is all lined up. We can change that when we come back up here to justify. Let's change it now to left. If we save this and run it, you can see now all that text is justified on the left side, right? It's not all lined up on the right anymore. And of course, center is pretty much like you would expect. It's just all going to be centered, right? It's not justified on either side. It's just straight down the middle. And, you know, these are kind of hard to read. You clicked the button and you see it's chopping off where the wrap is. You fix that with your Wraplength. So if we wanted to change this to 20, it's going to go 20 characters or 20 spaces, and then it's going to chop it off. That's not very many, right? So it's kind of hard to read. So if we go 80 or something like that, now we're seeing click me on all on one line. If we click this thing, you click the button, it sort of makes more sense. So you just have to play around with the Wraplength. If you have multiple lines of text, you'll also mess around with the justification to make it look however you want. So, all right, I'm going to switch this back to 0, which is the default. Now, if we save this, you'll see our button's going to be very big because it's all on one line. It's not wrapping it anymore. So we're also going to want to come back up here and get rid of all this extra text. There we go. Okay, so what else? We could change this back to 32. All right. Coming towards the end of our thing here. Here we have overrelief and relief. Let's go with relief first. Relief is sort of how the border of your button looks, right? And it can be sunken, raised, groove, flat, or ridge, right? One of the reasons why I like this book is because I don't ever remember that they're sunken, raised, grooved, ridged, or flat. So I always have to look it up. Raised is the default. So it's sort of that bumped up sort of button type thing. But we could also go groove. Let's go ahead and save this, run it. And you can see now our button is sort of a little different looking. Now, let's go ahead and also change the border width to like 10 to see if we can really make that pop out and really kind of see it. There we go. So now you can see this is grooved. We can also have ridge. Go ahead and save this and run it. Looks a little bit different. We can have sunken. Again, it looks a little different, kind of sunken in. Raised, that's the default. And we can also have flat. So let's go ahead and look at flat. No border at all, right? So let's change this to sunken. And now let's look at the overrelief. The overrelief is how does that look when the mouse moves over the button? So let's change this to flat, which is nothing at all. And the same thing is used there, sunken, raised, groove, ridge, and flat. So let's go ahead and save this and run it. Here's my mouse. It's not over the button, but now when I go over the button, boom, it changes to flat, which is nothing, right? So kind of interesting. You could be a little less dramatic. You can go raised, which is the default for just a regular button. So here we have sunken, raised, sunken, raised, sunken, raised, kind of flip-flops back and forth, whatever. And I've got this set to 10, so it's just very easy for us to see. If you sort of put it back at a normal level, so if we come up here to our BD and we just went 2, it wouldn't look quite as dramatic, but, for purposes of just checking it out, it's nice to have it real big so we can see exactly what it looks like. So, okay, next we have Takefocus, and Takefocus is all about the tab key. So let's say you've got 5 buttons, and yeah, you can move your mouse over and click on each one, but a lot of people like to just use their tab key to sort of move from thing to thing. Takefocus allows you to allow that or not, right? So the default is yes, you can tab things. But if we wanted to change this, for instance, to false, and this is a Boolean, true or false, we could go ahead and save this and run it. Kind of hard to tell, but when I hit my tab key, nothing happens, right? The button doesn't change at all. If we come back over here and change this back to true, run this guy again. Now when I hit my tab key, it kind of highlights a little, right? It has focus. So that's what that is. Underline is which item of text in the button is underlined. So if we actually, let me comment this out, save this, let's run it and just see what it does by default. You notice none of the letters are underlined, right? But if we want one underlined, which is sort of common with buttons, it starts at -1, I think is the default. So if we go 0 here, and actually I think we just do it like that, an actual number. So 0, think of it like a Python list. It starts at 0. So the C is 0. The L is 1, I is 2, the C is 3. So if we want the C to be underlined, which I don't know why you would, but if you did, you change that. Now the C is underlined. Woo! All right, very interesting. So, okay, that's that. Finally, we have the width, and that just changes the width, right? Same thing as before. If you're using text, it's gonna use text units as the sort of unit of measure. If you're using a button, it's gonna use pixels as the unit of measure. So you know a pixel is like one little dot. So you would need like 200 pixels to make it pretty big or whatever. So let's just change this to, I don't know, 40. Save that, run it. See, our button is now very big. So you really have to kind of play around with this. Maybe we want to go 20, something like that. Still very big. So let's go 10. And now we're getting back to sort of normal sized. You notice when we clicked it, it changed the text, but it didn't resize the button. So if you're using width and you need to resize the button on click, you would do that in the function. So we could come up here and go my_button.config and set the width to, I don't know, let's say 15 something, whatever. I have to play around with this. So now boom, and the button resizes, still not big enough to get all of that on there, but you'd play around with it and get it however you want. I don't know, let's try 18. Yeah, it almost fits there now, so probably 20 or 19, but our app isn't quite big enough for that. So you might have to resize the app too. Whatever. There you go. So now it all sort of fits, but just sort of keep that in mind when you use width. All right, so those are the main attributes. There's a couple more that I've got listed in the book, but they're so obscure, nobody ever uses them and almost can't use them. So I didn't, there's maybe 3 or 4 other ones, 2 or 3, but pretty much irrelevant. These are the ones you're gonna use all the time and kind of all there's to it. So that is everything you ever wanted to know about the button widget. Pretty fun. And like I said, this is the first of the widget series. We're just gonna go through alphabetically all 35 or whatever, however many widgets there are and TTK widgets. And we're just gonna do this. It's gonna be very boring unless you're very interested in changing these things for all these specific widgets. But if you are, it'll be a nice little library you can just kind of look up. Or if you've got the book, you could just flip to the book and, find the one you want and get all this information right from there. So that's all for this video. If you liked it, be sure to smash the like button below, subscribe to the channel, give me a thumbs up for the YouTube algorithm, and check out Tkinter.com where you can use coupon code YouTube to get 30% off membership. So that's access to all my courses, hundreds of videos, and the PDF of my new Tkinter book. My name is John Elder from Tkinter.com, and I'll see you in the next video.